Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. We're back. We're back and live again, as Doug's pointed out straight away. Finally making a live session again. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host, and I'm joined by the wonderful Rank Officer Sam. How you doing, mate?
Hello, my friend. Yeah, it has been a little while, hasn't it? We tend to save these occasions for the Champions League. Obviously, Champions League goes on a little bit of a break, had the international break, but it's good to be back, and it's good to have this competition back as well. It's the most exciting part of the season for sure.
Yeah, this is it. We're drilled in. We did a full Champions League preview show on the podcast last week. So if you haven't listened to that, probably worth your time before things kick off tonight. There's a link in the description as ever. It's good to have you all back with us. Doug says, no idea how Bayern City plays out, and Benfica Inter will either be the most exciting or the dullest game of all time in the first leg. So we're looking forward to getting into the meat and bones of some of these ones. Which one are you looking forward to more, Sam?
Well, I'm going to watch Bayern versus Man City tonight live, and then I'm going to catch up on Benfica Inter tomorrow morning. So I think that probably tells you where I'm at. You know, the one I pick live is probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most. That makes sense. So subconsciously, that's kind of where I've gone. Have to say though, gutted they clash. I mean, obviously, I'll catch up and I'll watch them both in full. But these are two games that I really would like to watch live, separate points. Kind of wish that one of them was tomorrow.
There was
I'm more excited.
they were bounced 5:30, 7:30 kickoffs. Go on, give the people what they want. UEFA.
100%. Yeah, I just wish that was the case. So I think tonight's going to be a really special night for sure.
Indeed. I just enjoyed this from Carl. Came up in the comments saying very weird timing. Only saw one of your videos for the first time. Just finished 2 minutes ago. Go to look at the others, and you've gone live. I've subbed though. Well, it's good to have you on board, Carl. And thank you very much for the subscription. If you are here and you aren't subbed to the channel, please do make sure you do that in order to get the best from us. Let's go straight into it then, Sam. And you've called it, so you get first dibs. We'll start with Manchester City versus Bayern Munich. And there's a lot to unpack with this, isn't there? You know, we looked at this a week ago and we weren't sure what we were going to get. We're still not quite sure what we're going to get from Thomas Tuchel's Bayern Munich. It's not necessarily new in that we didn't know hugely what we were going to get from Julian Nagelsmann's Bayern Munich, but they obviously made this decision with this game in mind, which means it's a big decision and a big game tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very tense situation for Bayern Munich here. They may have, taken the upper hand in the Bundesliga once again, which is very important to them, as we found out. More important maybe than we suspected, as we found out with Manu Vates on our podcast a couple of weeks ago. They've obviously been dumped out of the Pokal, which was a very early blow, and it probably did raise a few questions over the decision to make a decision like this in the manager position this late in the season. And of course, the spotlight descends upon this decision once again this evening, because Bayern Munich have been the best team in the Champions League so far this season. They've won all of their games. They've beaten Barcelona twice, Inter twice, and PSG twice, and they've held Mbappe and Messi and co to 0 goals over 2 legs. Like, there's no doubt about it. They've been the best so far. Will they continue to be the best is the major question here. And not only do they have to set about proving that that's the case, they've got to do it against a Man City side who have looked pretty damn good of late, haven't they? Looked pretty damn good. And this feels like it should be the Champions League final to an extent. You know, could easily be a final. We get it as early as the quarters. We get it over 2 legs, which I think is a massive positive. And I'm having great difficulty figuring out which way it's going to go, because the Tuchel factor is, it just adds this fresh element to it, this fresh element of unknown, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, City are 8 wins in a row in all competitions. There've been some tricky games in there. This is the trickiest of the lot of them. What are you expecting from City, and what do we kind of want to look at? Because there's obviously been this shift in formation, at least on the board, into this sort of 3-2-4-1 that City seem to really like, and a big part of this is John Stones.
Yes, John Stones lately has been very, very interesting, hasn't he? We've got his touch map, and we can take a look at the sort of positions he's taking up. This was against Liverpool, and Southampton at the weekend was very, very similar. We kind of paint City now in a 3-2-4-1. That's the shape that they utilise on the ball. Off the ball, John Stones will drop into right back. If they're If they have to face periods of pressure and periods of time where they're off the ball, Stones will be at right back. You can sometimes see him zipping up the flank to press the opponent's left winger or left back when the opponent are trying to play out from the back. So you know that he is, ostensibly responsible for the right-hand side. But on the ball, he just kind of drifts and does whatever he wants to. As you can see from the touch map, I'm telling you that basically this is the right back. And it's not a very right back touch map, is it? Now, Liverpool in midfield, we know are a little bit weaker than they usually are. And we know that their press isn't quite singing. And we know that Southampton are obviously 20th in the league. So they probably weren't going to give John Stones the headache that perhaps Bayern Munich are capable of. And one of the things that I've talked about all season long with regards to Bayern is their midfield, is the intensity and, the pairing of Kimmich and Goretzka and how physical and how dominant they can be and how difficult it is really to play out from the back when you play against Bayern Munich. PSG had all sorts of problems with it. All sorts of problems. They make it really difficult for you to find your feet and find your composure and slip into your groove. And what's City all about? It's all about control. It's all about finding that rhythm. So Bayern are going to work very, very hard here to make sure that City never find that. And I'm absolutely fascinated to see how that early battle plays out. I think what we'll see is some seriously intense 15 minutes of football to begin with. And I'm particularly interested to see how John Stones reacts to this because he's obviously an excellent footballer and capable of so much. We're still talking about a defender being pushed into midfield here. There's still going to be some, rough edges, maybe some inconsistencies, maybe some uncertainties. And if there is a team on this planet that can exploit and find and bring those out, it's got to be Bayern Munich. It's got to be.
Well, I mean, the Barnsley Beckenbauer coming up against Bayern gives its own narrative in itself, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
it is something we'll look at. I mean, do you want to look at the actual prospective lineups next, or do you want to move on to another player?
Yeah, let's have a look. I mean, so this is the difficulty. Obviously, this is who scored expected lineups. That is kind of more what it looks like off the ball. So fair enough. If lining it up like this is perfectly legitimate. But really, it will be on the ball. Ake, Diaz, Akanji is like a back three. Stones pops into where Rodri is. Rodri shifts over to where Gundogan is. And then Gundogan is level with De Bruyne in a line of four, which makes it Grealish, Gundogan, De Bruyne. And then they've gone for Bernardo. It might be Mahrez. We'll see what the rotation looks like. And once again, it's got wonderful width to it. Grealish and whoever the right winger is will provide great width. It's got a nice solid base. There's five behind the ball. Gundogan is superb. Oh, he's playing so well at the moment. The cleverness of his movements and his passing. He's not even looking where he's passing the ball anymore. He just chucks it around the shoulder, just plays no-look passes and creates goals. And of course, Haaland's in good form again now, returning from injury. So, yeah, very, very interesting team. And in Bayern, I think I know what City are going to look like. I really don't know what to expect from Bayern.
This is it, isn't it? It's like there's lots going on here. Muller is up there as a striker in this one. Obviously, against Freiburg in both games, actually, Eric Choupo-Maxime couldn't play. And when you're looking at Choupo-Moting, what he's brought to the table this season, he's kind of forced his way back in as that striker in the absence of Lewandowski. Obviously, Muller is a different type of player. And we've seen Tuchel go strikerless before, notably at Chelsea, in the way that he was trying to get at teams. And it's obviously something that's worked against City in a Champions League big game beforehand. Doug says, assuming Cancelo can't play, Cancelo can play. There is no rules like the Premier League in terms of how loan signings are allowed to feature against their parent clubs in Champions League. And you might remember years back, Thibaut Courtois playing for Atleti against Chelsea when he was on loan from Chelsea to Atletico Madrid, which was quite something. So there's talks about this. You could see it becoming kind of a little bit more fluid than this. Muller dropping back in alongside Musiala, someone like Sadio Mane going through up top and playing in that role, or Serge Gnabry even. But I'm so not lost, but I'm intrigued by how Bayern are going to go about their business this evening. And I think this is the hardest of all the four teams we're going to talk about today, to try and put a pin in what they're going to do, which makes them difficult as opponents for City, because it's hard to, have a game plan with someone you're unsure about how they're going to work the ball.
Yeah. I mean, there's the Tuchel Pep factor. Tuchel has tended to get the better of Pep recently. There's the point to be made that under Nagelsmann, we were never really sure what we were going to see either. So it's not like they've suddenly become unpredictable. They've been unpredictable basically the entire season. That's really worked to their favour over the course of this Champions League campaign. I do expect to see, right, what do we know is going to happen? Sommer's going to play in goal. Back four, expecting a back four.
Yeah,
Which,
I'd be surprised if it's not Diet Upamecano and Matthias de Ligt, even though Pavard came into the centre for Upamecano's ban at the weekend.
Yes, so Upamecano back in. I'd be surprised if it's a three. Nagelsmann liked a three. He likes to have the three players on the halfway line, and that gave him a really solid base. And Upamecano in the middle could kind of filter left, filter right. Expecting four here. Goretzka, Kimmich, yes. Musiala, yes, don't know where. Muller, yes, don't know where. And then there's, like, as you say, like,
I think Kingsley Coman will play. Kingsley Coman is one of those players that you just trust on Champions League nights, isn't it? He's just that guy.
Yeah, he always provides fantastic width, which is something that, the two coaches that will be presiding over this game always favour, always enjoy. And he's the kind of player that creates the space for Muller and Musiala to really have a lot of fun. Muller will not like playing up front if he does have to, so I do expect him to drop in and out and around a bit. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I wish I could give you the answers. I mean, we both do, but Bayern have been unpredictable at the best of times, and now they've changed manager. Let's see what happens. But what we do know is that Tuchel has tended to be very well prepared for Pep Guardiola, and we've got one more image to show, and it's basically highlighting the importance of Upamecano here, who, in a back four or a back three will be extremely important. So here's his defensive actions against PSG. So 2 legs, 180 minutes. The little dots are every time he makes a tackle or an interception or engages in a duel. As you can see, he's pretty much everywhere. He starts in the middle and then he's allowed to go left and go right. And he's allowed to sort of support de Ligt or support Pavard and wrap around the back. Bottom left of the screen. So if you imagine he's looking to his right, that's usually him trying to deal with Kylian Mbappe. Through the middle, that's him being very aggressive on the halfway line or just behind the halfway line. You can see it in the circle in the middle of the pitch. Lots of clustered actions there. And then occasionally he has to move to the left as well to try and help out de Ligt. But this is the painting of a very busy defender, someone who is incredibly mobile and able to get across the pitch and help out in certain scenarios. And this is the defensive actions map of a man who managed to hold PSG goalless just about, but he did so. And he managed to win about, I'd say, 50% of his duels with Mbappe, which is a hell of a percentage win rate for, when you're coming up against Mbappe, who makes mincemeat out of almost everybody. Now, looking forward to tonight, he's got Erling Haaland to play against. So you can expect Upamecano to be very aggressive against Haaland. You can expect Haaland to really enjoy that as well. These are two absolute physical machines, just incredible builds. And Upamecano is going to stick to him, I think. He's going to go for him. I think he's going to follow him deep. I think he's going to follow him around. And they're kind of going to go man to man at times. And it's going to be very interesting because I don't really know who's going to win that duel because I'd kind of back both of them, but it's impossible for them both to win.
Well, maybe a draw. Famously, we get them in football. Right, let's take a couple of questions about this before we move on to the other game. We'll stay with Upamecano for a second because Jordan says, who would you guys say is currently better between Konate and Upamecano? Would there be an awesome centre-back pairing these days? Yes, would be my answer to the second part of this. They've both grown into really good players. I think Konate's ascent has been slightly smoother, which might seem funny to people that he's been in and out of this Liverpool team, but Upamecano's was questioned, I think, upon that move to Bayern and made some big mistakes. But generally, I think both of them are starting to reach the top of this where we're going, right, yeah, two very, very good centre-backs verging on the elite level now in Europe.
Yeah, they're both excellent. It's really hard to pick between them. They've had funny trajectories, as you can tell. I'm going to use my hands to sort of paint it. So that they were like dead level here because they used to play together at RB Leipzig. And I think Konate just pushed himself ahead of Upamecano, but then Upamecano got the move anyway. And I feel like Konate has been consistently kind of edging ahead of Upamecano until this season, basically. And it's just kind of gone whoop, like that or like that. I think the World Cup had a lot to do with that. I think the World Cup, despite the fact that Konate stepped in and played well when needed to, Upamecano was consistently excellent. And I think we're at the point now where I'm adding Upamecano into this conversation of best centre backs in the world, which is a big step for me because I was probably one of his loudest doubters, wasn't I? Early doors, I was not convinced, and rightly so. Like, I stand by it. Like, he was error prone and rash, and this aggressive style that he has, it does have its pitfalls. It has its bad days. I think Konate had better raw defensive instincts and defensive mechanics. I think he was better defending his box. I just think he was a little less spectacular. But Upamecano started to pull all the other elements in together, and once he's done that, and once you do that, there's not a lot to pick at any longer. So I'd go Upamecano by a hair. It's a recent development, but big respect for Konate still.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I've got two more for you. They're going to run them into each other. This is from Siddharth, who says, what weird tactical shift will it be this time that makes us say that Pep has overthought again? And then I thought this worked in quite nicely from James, who said, is there any chance Kyle Walker comes back into starting 11 tonight? If so, how does this change the way City set out to play?
Right, okay. So Walker has had his spot in the team stolen by Stones. Pep has said that he does not believe Walker can play that role. He's actually been surprisingly vocal. He's literally said Walker can't do that. Like, he can't drift into midfield.
No, and you wouldn't want him there either, which is fair.
No. But so he's like, well, currently there is no role for Walker other than the Akanji role. So that would be the Akanji role, which I'd be up for seeing. I think it would make sense, but he hasn't tried that yet. Akanji might need to give him a reason to drop him, and he's given him absolutely nothing of late, right? So that would feel a bit harsh if someone got dropped. Of course, he may not want Stones in midfield against Bayern. He may want to return to a more orthodox back four, and he may want to put Walker in next to Akanji and drop Stones. That could legitimately happen. If I'm sat here wondering how will Stones cope with Kimmich and Goretzka, then there must be a part of Pep that's going, is this a good idea? Like, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, we've got another one from Stuart here who says, I could see an Alvarez next to De Bruyne, Pep curveball, which would be interesting, but I don't see it. I don't see it, just not with how good Gundogan has been of late. If Alvarez comes into this team, I think it's wide. I think it's wide, and I don't necessarily think this is the game that Pep decides that that's going to be one for him.
Yeah, I say this every time. I can't see a curveball coming. Obviously, there's going to be one coming. I can't see it. The biggest change I can see coming is Bernardo coming in for Mahrez, as Who Scored put it. That for me is the biggest, like, realistic potential change. But then again, we never really see them coming, do we? So it's hard to predict. I can't see Alvarez coming in though. Like, Gundogan and De Bruyne are absolutely undroppable here, and Haaland is Haaland. So yeah.
Yes. Well, if Julian Alvarez plays, then Julian Alvarez plays. But I think it's going to be more standard than maybe people are expecting tonight. And with that, I think it's probably time for us to flip to our other game, which is Benfica hosting Inter at the Luge. I'm really excited for this. I've got to say, I think that there's a completely fair point, obviously, that we read out from Doug right at the start, that this could either be incredibly exciting or incredibly dull. I'm completely on board with that as a concept. But I've just got a funny feeling that Benfica are going to come out like a train here. Obviously, they lost to Porto on Friday night. It's not something that I think is going to affect the title race. They've got a 7-point buffer with 7 games to go still. But it might have just given them a little wake-up call that maybe it's not all going to be quite as easy as it maybe seemed at one point for Benfica. And obviously there's the element of this where European competition, and we spoke about it on the podcast the other day, that they haven't won since that curse was put on them by Bayer Gutmann. And even Eusebio praying at his grave wasn't enough to turn that around. We got a comment on a YouTube video actually saying about this, that Benfica did win a European trophy for the first time a couple of seasons back. And I was thinking, going, what? And then I remembered it was the Youth League last year. Which was an incredible game. Well, I don't know, but it stopped the run. It stopped a run of 11 straight European final defeats, which is something at the very least. I don't know if it's enough to say that the curse has been broken, but I think it's enough to note at the very least. Inter have been dreadful of late. They're winless in 5. It's really not been very comfortable. Gerson's goal against Salernitana at the weekend was the first goal they've scored from open play in over 500 minutes, and they still conceded an equaliser. And I think this is going to be an incredibly difficult task for Inter tonight. I think that they're going to come back off the back of this one with a little bit of a bruising. So let's get into the ins and outs of it. And I just want to take a quick look at these passing networks, because something that we kind of know from Italian media is that we think Skriniar is out for this game. He's been a bit touch and go, but he's one of the ones that you're thinking. So it's Darmian, a right centre back, if you will, for Inter,
who was
look how
amazing at the Dragao. May I just remind you,
he was. I'm worried for him. You look at the way that Benfica set up. You look at the way that he tried to get into these positions. You look at the way that Grimaldo flies forward, and the idea of playing Dumfries ahead of Darmian would scare me a lot. If I was an Inter fan, it would scare the hell out of me. I agree that Darmian was excellent at the Dragao, and I think if Inter were on a fully fit side, it would be Darmian ahead of Skriniar. But Dumfries' defensive responsibility worries me. The fact that Grimaldo is going to be the one going past him and trying to get up to those areas worries me. And even if Irzarznez out on the left wing nominally in the sort of 4-2-3-1, the fact that Rafa Silva will drift into those areas would scare absolute hell out of me if I was an Inter fan. And that's the big worry, I think. Something you'll notice from this passing network for Benfica's size is that the forward here in the middle is Gonzalo Ramos. And part of the problem against Porto the weekend is they just couldn't get him into the game. They absolutely couldn't get him into the game whatsoever. And it was a major problem in that Benfica found it very hard to create opportunities. Obviously, the goal was no goal, etc., etc. But you go forward into this and you look at it, and this is Gonzalo Ramos's shot map in the Champions League this year. I'm going to make it slightly bigger just so you can dial in on it. This man is a monster in this area, which kind of spans the 6-yard box. And we talk about this a lot. We talk about this area when we're talking about Erling Haaland a lot. And it's about the areas you get into, which are sensible places to score goals from for a striker. And Ramos is good at it. His nose for that area of goal is excellent. His ability to drift into those spaces is exceptional. And he's a real handful, both on the deck and in the air. Now you compare that to the last 8 games here that I pulled up, which is Inter's shots conceded map. And this is busy. This is much busier than Inter will have wanted it to be. And this is the kind of thing, Sam, I think that might well lead Gonzalo Ramos to having an absolute field day tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Inter have been living very dangerously, haven't they, defensively over the last couple of months? Well, basically since the turn of the year. In pretty much any game I've seen them, they've looked far from solid. And the goalkeeper's always very busy. They over 2 legs against Porto. You know, there was some shots conceded in those 2 games, which felt like they were on the back foot at different points. They scraped through it. The last 5 minutes at the Dragao were some of the most dramatic and desperate defensive interactions I think I've seen from an Italian side in quite some time. So yeah, it wouldn't fill me with confidence here that Inter are stepping into this game, you know, feeling like they've got this. They don't have the strongest back 5 in place. They're not in a good vein of form. They're not in a good vein of confidence. They are a good knockout team, much better in the knockout,
and it's important to remember that
than league formats. But we've got an Inter fan, Abe, in our Discord from our Ranks FC Discord, and he's telling me, well, hang on a minute, that only applies to one-legged knockout times, not 2. So apparently they can't even have that to lean on. This is very concerning. Benfica are very aggressive and they're very intense. I would be very concerned from Inter's perspective at how they will deal with the pace of the game, like just the pace that Benfica will set at home with that crowd at the Luge, which is just, it's felt like a bit of a secret weapon for them this season, hasn't it? The atmosphere there looks fantastic, and
the
really
Inferno de Luge, as it's known.
Yeah, it's really played its part. It has. We say that about football grounds a lot, and maybe sometimes it's overblown, but I think Benfica's home crowd this year has been a real weapon. They're going to roar Benfica into this game. They're going to play with intensity and conviction. And I don't think that Inter are going to be able to cope with the speed of the game very well, the speed that Benfica set. And when that starts to happen, mistakes starts to filter into midfield. And that's when obviously Benfica start to pounce and get their opportunities to shoot. I've seen nothing from Inter this year, which tells me that they are either clinical enough in front of goal in attack or solid enough at the back to really get the better of this Benfica team. So if Inter do this tonight, you can consider me stunned.
Indeed. Hugo has pointed out the Inferno Deluge was nothing against Porto. It makes a very
it
fair
was for
point
20
about
minutes.
it.
For 20 minutes, it was something. And then they all looked confused, didn't they? When Porto kept scoring and there was the offside one that was just off. And the crowd looked a bit like, is this allowed?
This doesn't happen to us this year. What's going on?
The rules. They can score. Is that fine? They look really confused. Yeah. They don't have those games very often.
Let's pull apart these two lineups a little bit before we finish and take a couple of questions on this game as well. One of the ones you'll notice is Lucas Verissimo coming in here for Nico Otamendi, who's suspended. Verissimo is a funny old character because last year he looked exceptional, and then this year he was basically bombed out of the team. Obviously, Antonio Silva's emergence as the preeminent young star in this back line has helped. Obviously, Jorge Jesus had a relationship with Verissimo before. He was one that brought him over, and he felt like he was a key part of that side. He's got a big opportunity tonight to step in here and be like, hang on, Otamendi is, yes, important to this team, but this could be a future partnership, and we'll see how that one kind of trucks along. The other thing you'll notice is Bar is out at right back, which gives an opportunity to Gilberto. By an opportunity, I mean, that's a big blow for Benfica.
Bar got injured against Porto on Friday, didn't he? And I don't know what the diagnosis was, but he was kind of holding his hip or something. Yeah. And I was like, well,
it didn't look great.
Well, I mean, that's it. This is for Tuesday. That's not going to happen. And this is a huge, Bar has been, in amongst a sea of good stories for Benfica this season. He's been probably the biggest breakout, I think, from my perspective, in terms of coming from nowhere to somewhere. Absolutely incredible, really, in terms of improvement. And Gilberto, I don't want to be too rude to the guy, and he'll come in and do his bit, but he's a bit of a hatchet man compared to Bar, isn't he? It's silk and steel. Gilberto it will just charge around like a rhinoceros, and probably just like disrupt Inter, and it should do the job. But you're right, it's a big blow.
It's going to be a bit of a hatchet man battle on that left side if it is Fede DiMarco. They're both just steaming into each other at full pelt as much as they can, which is going to be exciting. It should be fun. One of the things you'll notice, Arsnes here, who's played this sort of left attacking forward role, I suppose. It's very much not really a left winger. And part of this has been his ability to get back and his defensive work rate in the centre. Obviously, Enzo Fernandez left for Chelsea, and in January, Chiquinho stepped into that role. He's done absolutely fine alongside Florentino. There hasn't been too much, I was saying, but part of this is Arsnes' defensive work rate, his ability to track back and get into a three and make this a thing. And it's going to be incredibly important, I think. I think that where you see Barella here in his role and the way that he bombs forward, Brozovic will be that pure six with Barella and Mkhitaryan either side of him getting forward. I think Arsnes' job tonight is going to be to try and stifle Barella and allow Rafa Silva to try and get into that gap between Darmian and Dumfries. So I think that's a really important battle here in the middle of the park, and just one to keep an eye on, because David Neres has had a good season productivity-wise. He's come back into the fold and made a difference. But I think that Schmidt will go here for Arsnes for that defensive security they'll provide against someone with the roaming capacity of Barella to get into the box and make things happen.
Not just that, but also just covering the spaces that Grimaldo leaves, which, and not having Otamendi on that side as well is another blow. So the line's kind of been taken apart a little bit. So you've got a couple of factors there which point to Arsnes just being a steadying influence. And I've quite liked the way Chiquinho is just kind of dropped into midfield post Enzo and just kind of strolled around a bit, done pretty well. Florentino Luis is still mopping up all of those tackles and interceptions and getting about a bit. And yeah, he's superb, absolutely superb. So it's got a nice balance to it, or has had a nice balance to it. But I'm intrigued to see what this Otamendi absence does for the balance of the line, particularly since he's the one that plays next to Grimaldo, who flies forward and so forth. So interesting. And then on Inter's side, we actually haven't seen that much of Brozovic this year. He's back to fitness now, but he missed a chunk. To my absolute shock, Hakan Çalhanoğlu basically reinvented himself as a sitting six, and actually did a tremendous job of it, which I just would never have seen coming. He's now a concern. I think ideally they'd have him instead of Mkhitaryan, but he's a possible injury. So who scored have put Mkhitaryan in there? And people might be surprised to see that Lukaku is not on the predicted starting 11. He hasn't tended to start the Champions League games. Inzaghi has tended to go for Dzeko, have Dzeko run around for 55, 60, give it everything, and then bring Lukaku on. I don't know if that's a sign that he's, a bit cagey and a bit cautious in these scenarios, or if it's just the ultimate trust he has in Dzeko on these kind of evenings. Either way, Dzeko does fine. But my number one task for Inter here, if they're to have anything out of this game, is that both Dzeko and Lautaro need to do a lot better with their chances. They need to do so much better with the balls they receive in the box. The amount of headers they've missed over the last 4 or 5 Champions League games when it's really counted has been quite stunning. And at this stadium, this crowd against this team, the chances need to be taken.
Indeed. Right, let's deal with a couple of questions before we go. There's been a couple of these. Sidith says Gonzalo Ramos versus Lautaro Martinez. Could either of them be potential Manchester United striker next year? And Jordan says, could this be Gonzalo Ramos's opportunity to audition for a big transfer in the summer? Where do you see him moving and thriving? If Manchester United can't get Kane or Osimhen, would Ramos be a good option? I don't think Lautaro is going to go anywhere, would be my overarching feeling at this point. He's obviously been given the armband at key points in this season. He's been Inter's key man. Other people have rotated around him, but Lautaro is an absolute fixture in this side. Now, obviously, if they miss out on the Champions League, and all things can happen and all things are possible, but I can't see Lautaro leaving unless something drastic occurs at Inter. And I know that there are different questions about their financial situation, etc., etc. But I think that if they can hold on to anyone, he'd be the player that they'd want to hang on to here.
Yes, Lautaro, interesting one. He's a strange one and a difficult one to project because he's not really a number 9. He is, but he's also just not. He's almost always played as a support forward for Inter. Always played off a target man, off a reference point striker. He's done a bit of number 9 stuff for Argentina, but actually in the World Cup, he ended up losing his spot, and Julian Alvarez was much more of a 9, a sole 9, a stretching 9. Lautaro basically plays as a 10. And so, it depends what you want in your striker, but considering how Manchester United are built, I wouldn't see Lautaro as a particularly good fit there. I think it's a busy area of the pitch for them already. I don't feel the same about Ramos. I mean, Ramos is a 9. You can wheel the shot map back up if you like, but we know that he's a player that has a nose for those opportunities, those areas of the pitch. His goal record since stepping into the Benfica team has been outstanding. I would imagine that Man United, when they set their sights on a striker this summer, they'll be looking for something a little bit like that. Less what Lautaro would be like, which would be a lot outside the box, a lot of stuff trying to link play. Ramos would be a much better fit there. So yeah, interesting one for him. I don't know how ready he is to move. Feels relatively ready. Correct me if I'm wrong there. It wouldn't feel too soon.
No, I think it would be good for him to take another year, if I'm being perfectly honest, at Benfica, especially if they can continue to build on this season. If people aren't going to leave, if Roger Schmidt is allowed that ability to keep growing this team, I would really like it if Gonzalo stayed another year at Benfica. I think just to kind of just set himself for one of those big moves. They can be quite daunting, and we've seen people struggle with them before. Now, I wouldn't go so far to say that Darwin has struggled at Liverpool this year. I think that a lot of the criticism has been hugely overblown, and that actually his goal and assist return has been pretty good for a man playing in a relatively struggling side. But I just think that there's an element of wow, you're thrown into the fire. I just think that Gonzalo Ramos obviously was having an excellent season before the World Cup. think everyone started getting his name on their lips once he scored that hat-trick against Switzerland in the round of 16. I just think he could do with another season just to cement himself and then make a step. Or at least if he's going to make a move this summer, going straight into a Manchester United, a Real Madrid, the places he's been linked to, where these are, the expectations are so high on every single level. Maybe that's not the move. And if so, I think staying at Benfica would probably be a better shout nonetheless. So yeah, one of those. I think that he could do with another year, but if he did move, I wouldn't be like, oh no, it's too soon, he's not ready. I just think he could do with a cementing year before anything else happens. We'll finish with Doug, who said, you've definitely led me to believe that the Benfica left into right wing is going to be decided. If they cancel each other out, it'll be dull. If both go crazy, the whole game could go nuts. I think that's a pretty fair standard bearer for what we've said about this game. 100%. Right, with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do is to say thank you so much to all of you for all your questions and for tuning in here on YouTube. Please do hit that subscribe and like button if you haven't done so already. It would mean the world to us. If you fancy having listened to the podcast, the links are in the description. They'll be there for you to take advantage of. There is a Champions League show up there. We've got a new show coming tomorrow about the best front threes in Europe. So that's more to look forward to as well. Thank you so much to Mr. Sam Tyler Rankod.
Cheers, mate. Enjoy the games tonight.
Indeed. And all of you enjoy the games tonight. It's going to be lots of fun. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you tomorrow here for those second preview games. Take it easy, gang. Peace.